Hello, and welcome to the 63rd episode of the Veggies Abroad podcast. I'm your host and chief veggie pusher, Rebecca Gady Sawicki. If you're new around here, Veggies Abroad is a travel company that believes exploration should be a force for good, and for us, that starts with being plant-powered. Every trip we design is guided by compassion for people, animals, and the planet. From custom trip planning and small group adventures to our blog, chock full of guides, tips, and inspiration, and of course, this podcast. This show is all about shining a light on the businesses, people, and ideas that make travel better, from vegan-friendly experiences to responsible tourism practices and community empowerment, because those are the things we may need more of and the things worth supporting when we travel. So just a few housekeeping notes before we jump into today's episode. I think I've said it before, but it bears repeating. The only trip that we have space for this year is Thailand. It is in November during Thanksgiving, so if you want to avoid your weird relatives saying, "Ew, what are you eating?" or "I can't eat that, it's vegan," come with us. We won't judge you. We'll want you to share your food. We will eat all of the yummy things and have an absolute blast. In addition to that, we do have some spring trips up on the website for next year. We're headed to India. Well, ladies only are heading to India in March. And then from there, we're hitting Greece and Peru. There are more tours in the works for next year. Expect those announcements to come this summer. Okay, so this episode might challenge some perspective, and that's okay. My goal isn't to tell you what's right or wrong, but to give you something to think about the next time when you're booking a trip and making a decision. Because living a lifestyle focused on reducing harm can feel straightforward until you start really navigating the real world, which is anything but. So let's jump into what vegan-friendly travel really means. And to help me with that is my part-time traveling partner and full-time chef. Hi, Matt.
I don't know about full-time chef, but hello.
I do. Okay, so this is a topic that I think could be touchy for some people, and I actually am expecting to get some maybe angry emails after this. I hope not. I hope I get some emails that are like, I didn't really think about things like that, or you've changed my perspective. But I'm open to receiving any and all. Hopefully no one is like, I'm never talking to you again after this, but I guess we're going to find out. So what came up for me is that we all define vegan friendly a little bit differently. And I realized this after multiple of our tours and spending time with a really diverse mix of people. And not everyone kind of had a straightforward response to it, and everyone's expectations were different. And it's been really interesting and enlightening to learn all of that, but it also has put me sometimes in weird positions where it's like, oh, well, that's not really possible. And, meeting those expectations, I guess. So when you hear the phrase vegan-friendly travel, what does it mean to you?
I mean, I think there's a difference between vegan-friendly travel and straight vegan travel. I think getting to the point where it's just vegan travel would be something that's very difficult, because you have to consider all the things that go into having a totally immersive vegan experience. And I think what people don't realize is that to be completely vegan, it would have to encompass more than just food and include considering the broader ecological footprint, and all of the different things that go along with that. Like if you go to a hotel, you're not just thinking about the food that they might provide you for breakfast. You're thinking about the sheets. Are they vegan sheets? You're thinking about the toiletries. Are the toiletries vegan? But then even beyond that, you want to start thinking about, is this place sustainable? And what you really need to think about when it's vegan friendly is, are people trying? Are they doing the best they can? And that's what vegan friendly to me would be, is that it would be inclusive of vegans while also catering to people who may not be vegan.
You raise an interesting point of vegan versus vegan friendly. And actually, in all honesty, when I first started writing out everything on the tours or like on the website, I actually did at first write vegan friendly, but herein lies the problem. People aren't searching for vegan friendly travel, and so you end up getting kind of stuck with using search terms that people are looking for. And for the most part, I would say most people are pretty open to the, the nuances of like, hey, there's no way that this could be 100% vegan. Like, there aren't enough vegan hotels in the world to make this possible. There are no vegan planes. I have to drive my car to the airport, and that car isn't vegan. I mean, like, when we get down to the brass tacks of it, like, it's not possible. So it all is friendly on the side, but I just don't know that that always aligns with what other people are thinking. Like, I think there's a subset of people that think about food and food only, and then a subset of people who think about everything else. Do you think expectations change when you're traveling versus when you're at home?
I think travelers often exert higher carbon footprints in host countries than they would at home. I think when you're out in the world, like, you're kind of carefree. I'm on vacation, and you're not thinking about how you're affecting the planet. You're not thinking about all of these other things, and you might take a break from the lifestyle that you live at home because you say to yourself, well, I'm on vacation. I mean, I don't think that would stop a vegan person from continuing to eat vegan. I just think that they might take a step back and maybe not worry about, like, their footprint and what they're doing when they're there. Like, I mean, just a flight alone, right, is a big carbon footprint.
So, like, you're touching on the environmental impact, which I do think that is a huge part of adopting a plant-based diet, but that for everyone isn't always a part of it. And actually, I think I didn't look this up, the technical definition of veganism, but it is omitting animal products. So it would be like, at home you consider the clothes you buy, or you consider the cleaning products you use, or where you're shopping, and so on and so forth. And so, like, those are the things that I wondered if people leave at home than when they travel. So
then do you think that when people travel and they're out, shopping at at a market, or, somewhere that they wouldn't be shopping at home, like a big outlet or something where there's all kinds of different things for them to buy, do you think that they're going to buy things that may contain animal products while they're there just because they're in another country?
No, I'm thinking more so along the lines of, like, you might not think of so you like research all of the cleaning products that are in your cupboard or something, or like the companies that you're supporting, to make sure that they aren't testing on animals. But then when it comes down to booking a hotel, though you might not be as thorough maybe in that investigation, because you just want to make sure that it's someplace where you can eat. And so you're not really considering, like, is my pillow filled with down, or is it filled with something synthetic, and things along those lines.
One of the lucky things for me is that I get to travel with you and that you do a lot of the research for these things for me. So I feel a lot more comfortable when I go somewhere, and knowing that you have my back, and that you've been looking into a lot of this stuff, and the places that we're going are going to be sustainable, and they're going to try and use fewer animal products. And that's one of the really great things I feel happens when I travel with you. Now,
well, I feel like there should be an asterisk on that, because I do the absolute best I can with what I have, and that isn't always possible. We live in a world that does not focus on I guess overall being kind and doing the best that we have, and for some people that's completely out of reach. So you do with what you can with what you have, and sometimes that is something really great, and sometimes that's less than great.
So then, do you think people's expectations of your trips might be too lofty, I guess might be the word, because you're researching all that you can and you're trying to find out everything that you possibly can. But then there might be some instances where it's really difficult and there's not that much you can do about an animal product being offered somewhere, or maybe a toiletry isn't completely vegan. It's definitely cruelty free, or maybe they leave like some chemical product out that, you would never use at home, but that's all that they had available at the hotel.
Yeah. I don't know. That is a good question. I guess when I first started, I didn't have I don't know that I really thought about that. But now, as I've gotten to know more people with kind of diverse backgrounds and have, different ideas on what they expect, it is really kind of a mixed bag. And so I stand by, doing the best with what we can, with what we have in front of us. And, I always will with prioritizing certain things. But it's just, it is definitely on the friendly side. We have to, we can't make anything 100%. Like, that's just not, really possible. I think the focus has to be on reducing harm overall. And so, the reason for doing this episode and kind of breaking down what vegan friendly means and yada yada, and if people have different perspectives on it, is because this actually came up on a recent tour, and it came up at a hotel we stayed at in Costa Rica. And so a lot of the hotels that we look for, and I always try and prioritize. I look for places that are giving back to the community, that are taking care of the greater environment where they're around. They're obviously going to have vegan food. They are taking care of wildlife if wildlife exists near them. They're going above and beyond, and those are the places that I really like to highlight. And really like to make known to the travelers, like, hey, we're staying here because X, Y, Z. And there have even been times where, the owner has been on the property, and so they've talked to the group and talked about how they've gotten started, or, what's important to them, or the charities that align with them. And I think that's really important, because then people see in real time, like, okay, like, these guys really care. It does matter where I'm booking a hotel, and, so on and so forth. So that is something that is important to us as a business, and, me personally. But, we did have some tension, because at a specific hotel that was doing a lot of really great things, had a lot of good food, there were cows on the property. Some people didn't really think anything of it. And some people even said, like, well, I know dairy is popular, and they have to, what is the word for it? They have to be able to serve a diverse group of travelers that come in. They're not a vegan hotel. So, they didn't have any qualms, like, really with it, knowing, that that's their business. And then other people were pissed about it. So if you were there, what do you think your initial reaction would have been?
Well, the first thing I want to say is that one thing that I think I learned from you, or maybe it was in a book, but we are...
I'm going to go, it was probably in a book.
Possibly. We are living in a non-vegan world. And so we're vegans living in a non-vegan world. So we always have to remember that this world is not catering to us all the time. And there are other people in this world that are not vegan. But I know that accommodations account for 20 to 25% of tourism's total carbon emissions. So when you think about the footprint of maybe some of these big chain hotels versus what a little boutique, for lack of a better word, like a small boutique hotel is doing, and that just happens to have a cow, well, I think that cow is providing quite a bit for that small hotel. I mean, whether you agree with that or not, because you're vegan, I think they're still trying to do their part to reduce, the carbon footprint of their business,
Yeah, and I think personally, seeing something like that feels worse, or you might feel more upset about it because it's right in front of you than if it were something happening in the background. Because we all have to remember, like, I'd say the vast majority of us go to restaurants that serve animal products. We go to markets that serve animal products. We stay at hotels that serve animal products. So it's just the fact that you can see the animal there that I think makes the difference. And you're right. We have to kind of look at the bigger picture of this because, it's important. Obviously, it's important to, our business, to me personally, that hotels, that places have vegan options. You mentioned carbon, and a plant-based diet is a huge reduction in those savings by more than 50% with some estimates. So it's not a small amount, but there are also a whole lot of other things that we have to consider than just what's on our plate, because we could be gosh, what am I trying to say? We could be going somewhere that's has great vegan options, but it's doing a real shit job and everything else. And so that doesn't offset it. Travel itself accounts for about 10% of global carbon emissions. So we have to look at, the bigger picture. I think it's important not to pull just one thing out. And I think that's where people get stuck. And I think that's probably where people will get mad at me, because that is, for some, that's kind of like their cross to bear, that no matter what, that can't happen, I guess. Does that make sense? Did I just ramble?
I think it makes sense. I think I understand what you're trying to say. People have high expectations, and they expect you to understand what their high expectations are, but they forget that we're vegans living in a non-vegan world.
Yeah, it's like shopping at a grocery store. You might buy a plant-based product, but that store still sells meat. So it's like, where do you draw the line? And it's not just whether, a place has veggie sausage on the menu. Again, it's, looking at that full picture of how places operate, to me personally. Because there could be so many other things going on behind the scenes, like food waste, which is huge in hospitality, or energy and water use, which is massive in hotels, or even how staff are treated and paid. They might be happy and nice and greet you lovely, but in the background, they might be making, less than $1 a day. So, those are all really complex issues that have to be put into these conversations, I think. Around the idea of food waste, previous to this job, I worked for a food rescue, and got to see that firsthand, how much food is wasted. And it's about 1/3 of all the food that we produce. And so you think about at some of these hotels and places that are producing massive buffets and have massive restaurants, multiple restaurants. So much of that, could say 40% of it, is going in the garbage. And that's creating, carbon, extra emissions. Obviously, it could help people who need it. So those are always things that, I like to think about. We talk about energy consumption. Hotels, buildings can account for about 30% of global energy consumption. And, I think also, you say these figures, hotels could use 100 to 2,000 liters of water per guest per day. That sounds a lot, but I think the more important thing is to talk about some of these destinations that are actually dealing with these issues. Like in South Africa, they have for years been dealing with ongoing power outages. Residents can lose electricity for up to 2 to 8 hours per day. And most hotels have generators and backup systems, so guests never notice. And then that also requires additional fuel and energy, which adds another layer to the overall impact. But, think about if you were living in this place, you couldn't get Wi-Fi, you couldn't get your work done, you had to do it on odd hours. You couldn't go about your daily life, but this person from New Jersey shows up and they have a wonderful time and they have no idea of what the greater impact is going on around them. And those are things that I think we need to be conscious of travelers, or like the Greek islands. This always is a shocker to people. So on the islands, they have limited access to fresh water, which causes water shortages, especially during the summer. And that has caused locals to have to pay more for shipping water, facing usage restrictions, and also the tap water often on many of the islands isn't safe to drink, which you wouldn't think about that with Greece. Like, you think of all the beautiful pictures and, if it's wonderful and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, it's crazy because in Europe, water usage on average by your average traveler from the US or wherever is 300 liters per guest per night versus 144 liters for a local resident. That's crazy, insane amount of water it's double the amount of water being used by a tourist than it is by a local. And so the people that are coming to visit and experience a different lifestyle are draining the resources of these places. And I know we've talked about this in other podcasts. And to your point earlier on food waste, the global hospitality industry wastes around 100 million tons of food annually. Mm-hmm. That is an insane amount. So you think of all these things that travelers are doing to the environment and to local communities. And it's definitely, can we do better? And is there someone out there trying to do better? And to go back to the farm earlier, sure, you see, a cow and it bothers you and it triggers you out on the field. But when you think of all the other stuff and you put it into context, the food waste, the water usage, and how there's water scarcity across, a lot of the destinations that you might visit, well, then that cow isn't such a big deal, is it?
Hey there, fantastic listeners. Let's hit pause on this episode for a thrilling announcement, a golden ticket to Globetrot with Veggies Abroad. Veggies Abroad isn't just your go-to for vegan guides and trip planning tips. It's your passport to extraordinary small group journeys, carefully crafted by the ultimate veggie pusher and your favorite podcast host, me, Rebecca Gady-Sawicki. I've spent countless hours researching the best vegan hotels, food, and experiences, and now I'm bringing those experiences directly to you. Join me and my newfound veggie pals on escapades to exotic and exciting destinations around the world, whether it's trekking through the Thai jungle to witness elephants in their natural habitat or exploring Iceland's famous ring road. Our adventures are nothing short of spectacular, and guess what? Those aren't the only exciting trips awaiting you. So what are you waiting for? Cruise on over to veggiesabroad.com pronto. Well, how about after this episode is over to explore our dazzling lineup of tours and secure your spot today. I think it goes back to, it depends on who you're talking to, but I agree with you. You have to put it in perspective. I do think the more I travel and the more I meet people, the more willing I am to put things in perspective, because, I have also probably been there too, where I, called out someone for, something and didn't consider the full picture because I was really set on, one specific part of the argument. But I think that in this day and age, we have to think about that. And I feel a bit like a broken record with saying the bigger picture, but I think it's one of those things that bears repeating. So I guess this is leading to us of the battle of perfect versus better. And if millions of people make imperfect but better choices, then the impact is far greater than just a small number of things doing perfectly. And I've actually seen this pop up a whole lot more on Instagram with influencers encouraging people to like, hey, stop arguing with one another, stop calling someone out because, they said they were vegan or they were going to try to be vegan, but then they ate eggs or something. Like, that's not going to do any of us any good. If we have a lot of people who just give up and they're like, forget it, I'm going back to how I lived my life before because this was too hard and people weren't, kind or helpful with that. And I think travel also is one of the hardest places to live your values perfectly. I mean, to be fair, I think life in general is really hard. Perfect is just not a possibility. And, and I think for me personally, I always try to come back to the fact that I wasn't born thinking that, eating animals was terrible. And I think most people don't come out of the womb thinking that either or are raised with those values. I actually grew up showing horses, for heaven's sakes. I lived across from a cow farm, and I ate animals for a good portion of my life, up until I was 12. So, I mean, it's a process for me, too. And I always tell that to, when we get non-vegans or vegetarians or, people who are curious on tours or who want to work with me on a trip or whatever, that I'm not going to judge you. And no one should judge someone else who's in a different place on that journey, because we've probably all been there. And we have to remember that. Do you think people put more pressure on themselves when they're traveling?
When you say pressure to have like the perfect experience?
Yes.
Well, I think there's a certain sect of travelers that all want that Instagrammable moment, Mm-hmm. So they're out there looking for that perfect shot or, just that perfect end of the day where they catch the sunset, where everything just goes right for them. Like every single thing during the day is perfection, like you're saying. But that can be overwhelming, and it's really just not achievable. And I think that you put that versus the person who's just trying to do better. So you have your average traveler as well, who, they're not out there trying to be a perfect vegan, but they are trying to do better and be a better traveler. When you think about how dietary shifts from, non-plant-based to going to more of a plant-based vegan lifestyle, that can save the globe, the world, like 21 to 30% of all greenhouse gas emissions, because 21 to 37% of all global greenhouse gas emissions come from the food system. So if you're trying to better yourself and lower your footprint, then you're helping towards that goal. You don't have to be perfect, but you have to keep trying. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's better to keep trying than, like you said earlier, to just give up. And, putting your pressure on yourself to be perfect, well, no one's perfect and you're never going to get there. So You do what you can, but you also live your life, and you have to enjoy these moments as well, because you're out here to enjoy the moments. So if you're letting little things bother you, or holding yourself to these high standards, or overwhelming yourself trying to be perfect, then you're also not going to have a good time.
Yeah, 100%. And honestly, I don't think that it's any different than in our daily lives, because I think about that often when people get, all upset about, I don't know, buying Oreos, for heaven's sakes, or someone shopping at, I don't know, a fast food chain or whatever because they had a vegan option. Like, we don't, once again, live somewhere that makes it really easy. And there are so many things. Like, I listened once to a podcast episode about an interior designer who was talking about like paint and wood, and that most of it's probably not vegan because of the glue. And I was like, okay, well, oh, geez, I didn't know that. And definitely made that mistake. I mean, there's just so much that we don't realize. And I think we have to stop with this battle for perfection, and that it has to be doing the absolute best with what we have. Anyway, and so I think this really ties into something people also don't really think about, is why vegan businesses struggle. And this is something like I see it online all the time. I go back and forth with it, and it's not just like it definitely is a big vegan business thing, but also businesses who are more values driven. Like, there's a real struggle. And it's something that I don't think it's talked about enough, is how hard it is to run a business that focuses on those types of values, especially in travel. Because on one hand, expectations are incredibly high. But on the other hand, the reality of operating this kind of business is really challenging. And about 50% of small businesses fail within the first 5 years.
That's all small businesses too.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, all small businesses. And so then, if we tried to dive down into like the vegan sector of that, I couldn't actually find any stats on the amount of like vegan or values focused sustainable businesses that close, but you could guess that like maybe 1 to 3% of the global population is vegan or vegetarian. So roughly about 1.3 to 1.5 billion international tourists arrive globally each year into different destinations. And so even if we're generous, and I think this is way too generous, like around 10% of travelers are vegan or vegetarian. That means 90% of travelers are not. And so then that makes it even harder for those businesses, small businesses operating in these destinations to continue. And I have to imagine that the failure rate has to be closer to, 80% maybe. It really would be great if we could somehow get that data. I actually have a friend who operates hotels in Greece. Hotels, it was plural. And they recently had to sell the second one because, she shared that she wasn't really getting any support from non-vegans. The vast majority of their bookings, she wasn't getting any support from vegans. The vast majority of their bookings were non-vegans, people who thought the hotel was really cool, that they liked the pictures. And that is something that I know when I talk to clients or I talk to other guests that they do not think about. They think that, we only attract, vegans or vegetarians. And actually, on our tours, I have not yet had a tour that has been just vegans. Every trip has had omnivores. Omnivores or vegetarians? No, omnivores. Now that I'm thinking about it. And so like for even something that's so niche, like a vegan tour, even I don't have that full support as well. And, on top of it, it can be much more expensive of running a vegan business. And, that's, definitely a big reason, aside from support, that they fail. Sourcing ingredients is really challenging, finding the right partners, finding partners that will work with you. That is something that I run into a lot. I've had people not respond to emails, people tell me to go and find someone else, and we don't have the same buying power as large companies. So the pricing that I get for a tour is always going to be different than if I were a multi-million-dollar company. And that is absolutely something people do not think about.
And one thing you have to consider in all that is marketing, because that's what I'm really hearing. So it's really hard for a small vegan business to get their business out there, especially when you consider something like giant booking platforms like Expedia might spend up to 30% of their revenue on advertising to keep customers in their ecosystem. Meanwhile, like a small vegan-friendly business might struggle to even reach 2%.
That's mine. That's how much I spend right now is about 2%. And
That's what I'm saying.
that oftentimes I think, oh, should I cut that? But I can't. I actually have to consider, like, do I just make less? Because I need to consistently keep reaching, new people. And,
You do.
It's challenging to find them and then getting them to trust me. Because that's a whole big part of the marketing funnel is like you get someone in who's interested, but then their diary has to open up for that time period. They have to have the money for it. Then they have to trust you. And all of those things. So it's not as easy as just like, oh, somebody saw that and they're immediately going to buy it. This isn't like, buying a pair of socks. This is a much larger investment. And, we're also competing with really large brands that have so many more resources that, think about things like discounts and loyalty systems and point systems. Often they're tied into credit cards, and booking platforms constantly push business back to them. So that makes it, really hard as well to compete with that. I've had many clients that are like, hey, so we want to do X, Y, or Z, but like, can we book a Marriott property because we have points? I mean, I get it. I use points too because like my budget is not Scrooge McDuck's budget.
No.
So I have to be wise about that. But that also makes the playing field completely uneven.
I think back to our first tour that you did. And, we were asking like your travelers, like how they found you and how they decided to go with you for their trip. And I remember one of the lovely couples on that tour, I remember Nirik, and he was basically like, I didn't really know if I should book with you because you didn't have any reviews and you were like brand new. And then
he didn't know if I was real.
Yeah, he didn't even think you were real. Yeah. And then he's like, but I've had the best time. This was a great trip. I don't remember his words exactly, but you end up going with something that isn't as well known, but it fits your values. And
it's a risk.
It's a huge risk because you didn't have the money to advertise back then as much as you do now. And you're still not even anywhere near competing with the bigger companies and how much they can spend on advertising. So it makes it extremely difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy. It's just not even a fair fight in so many ways. And, I always have like other retreat leaders and business owners who reach out, and they think because they see one thing like on social media or the internet, and they're like, you figured it all out. And I laugh, like literally laugh out of my chair, because I'm like, no, I do not have it figured out. I just present the most professional view that I do have it semi figured out, and just figure out the rest as they go. And I guess throw money at this, throw money at that, and try and make it work and make the best decisions possible. But it is so, so hard, and you have to find the right partnerships to elevate you. And for somebody in so many businesses that are vegan focused that, I've met the owners, a lot of them don't come with a background in business or anything related to that. They've started because they were passionate about it. Which, I get, but passion will only take you so far. This business will absolutely eat you up and spit you out. There have been plenty of times where I've thought, I don't know if I humanly can continue to do this, because it's challenging. And so, if you started this on a wing and a prayer and you've got $10 in your bank account and you think that everyone's going to support you because, your values are aligned, whew, you got another thing coming, honey. Like, it's just challenging, but nobody really thinks about that. But what they do think about, what I see more, is coming onto Facebook groups and bitching, like, I stayed at this hotel and they said they had a vegan menu, and then this is what they gave me. Or there was a hotel, I remember they made a mistake in like the sourcing of something, and so they handed out something they shouldn't have. Man, the internet erupted. And I always tell people, I actually had somebody reach out to me after that, and she was like, "Are you gonna call this place? What are you gonna do?" And I was like, no, like, let them respond. Like, chill out. They do not need pitchforks and flames thrown at them. Like, you have no idea what's going on. Like, running a hotel is incredibly challenging. And, giving people the space to breathe and to say, like, hey, we made a mistake. Like, let that happen. And the hotel did come out and posted something and was like, hey, yeah, we're learning, and we didn't realize this, and we made a mistake, and we're, doing training with staff and blah, 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 blah. Like, people, I think we have to be flexible. We have to exude a bit more kindness. All those t-shirts that people like to wear that's like, kind is cool, or be kind, or whatever. You need to do that and stay off flipping Facebook with all of the ranting.
You're getting a little preachy over there.
I am, because it drives me absolutely up the wall. But anyway, okay, I think we've probably hit the high points of struggling as a vegan or a values-driven business. There's another layer of this which is really interesting, and it's a visibility or invisibility bias, and that we might react stronger to what we can see. Because I bring this up, I'm going back to the cow. So the cow is visible, but supply chain's invisible. And
that poor cow. You were just...
I know.
You're just hammering
the cow
home on
was
that poor
fine.
cow.
The cow looked happy, and I'm not going to go on about the cow. At least the cow wasn't in a feedlot somewhere in Nebraska.
If you're somewhere and you see a bunch of chickens running around on someone's property, or a hotel property, are you upset by that?
Well, that goes back to my point of, like, you see it, but you don't see the supply chain that is behind some of these other larger places or regular places that you would book. The supply chain is invisible, but that supply chain is probably connected to things that you would hate even more than the cow being on a property or chickens running around someone's yard. Because a lot of those, I've done some work with the Humane League and trying to promote their, they have a campaign for getting chickens out of cages for the cage-free egg campaign. I can't for the life of me think of the name of it, but they had a big travel section of that with pushing hotels to stop purchasing eggs that were not cage-free. And there were huge names, huge hotel brands that were on their list. There were airlines, there were cruise companies, all types of places that were on there. But these are the things that you just can't see. And so you assume, like, it's fine, I'm not buying that specific thing. But your dollars 100% still go to supporting that, whether you eat it or not. Because you pay the same amount, and this is always an argument that everyone has, is like, having to pay extra for avocado or taking cheese off something and still having to pay the going rate for it. You still pay the going rate, regardless if you eat that or not. Which then goes to support those supply chains that you don't see, and to support the purchasing of animals that are in, massive cement feedlots and packed in like sardines, and chickens that have died and are walking over each other and rotting. So I think this is, going back to, we're all operating in a system that is not perfectly aligned, that it's not perfect, that we're all part of a global economy, which it means at some point we're interacting with systems or companies that are not, fully vegan. They're not fully, they don't have all of the things that probably you care about, whether that's banking, credit cards, supply chains, booking platforms. So it becomes, in my mind, it becomes less about finding something that's 100% perfect and more about asking, where can I make more intentional and better choices within that system?
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And you really nailed that home, because if we're conscious of where we're spending our money and we're making the best effort that we can to be conscious about it, then we can continue to support the things that we care about. Wow. I know that if we're investing in certain things, that it may go towards some things that we don't believe in, or it may be against our values. But if that company is at least trying, and we're putting our money in an area of their company where we want to see change, or how we want the change to be, then we're kind of the pioneers trying to steer a large ship in a better direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And, with anything, I think meeting people where they are is incredibly important. Back to my point of we haven't had one trip that has been fully vegan, and I always really enjoy the omnivores or the flexitarians or whatever the heck they want to call themselves that come on the trip, because a lot of them, they end up in a situation where they get to try new things and there isn't judgment. And I'm so happy to create a space where they can test out things that maybe they wouldn't have at home or haven't had the opportunity, and to change their perspective. And I'll never forget, there was a couple guys on a tour a while ago, and they were both super nervous about it. They thought it was going to be terrible. They thought they were going to starve. And by the end of it, they were like, this was amazing. The food was so good. And the one even took his wife out on a date and picked a vegan spot that he would not go to in the past. And so I think these things, while people don't like the idea of I have to sit by someone who actually, still eats meat or whatever, I think we need to use that as an opportunity, again, to promote kindness and to encourage them to hey, try that. And to meet people where they are, because again, I highly doubt any of us walked out of the womb thinking eating a chicken was weird.
It's interesting that you brought up one of the travelers from the Thailand trip. I hope I'm not calling him out, but Ron.
I was going to say I wasn't going to call him out. Okay, and you just did. He liked you. He might not like you now.
I still think he'll like me. But Ron, I can picture Ron telling his friends, hey, I'm going on this vegan trip. And I'm going to die. I can picture that. And I can picture his friends just giving him the business, just giving him a hard time. And I really think that when you take that and you expand that to a broader picture, we all face a lot of peer pressure. And sometimes the way we feel about things is influenced by what we hear and what we see from others. I mean, that's why Instagram is so popular, or Facebook is so popular, because you're getting social proof versus professionals, kind of, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And, so now you're on this trip and you're free from that peer group, telling you this is ridiculous and this is crazy, all this vegan stuff, do you see, I bet you they're just eating grass or whatever it may be. And then he's actually living it and experiencing it without people telling him how he needs to think about it. And he's like, wow, I really like this. I feel a lot better. This is pretty good. I can do this. I can take my wife out to a vegan dinner when I get home, because, I don't have to do it all the time, but I can do this once in a while. And that's a really big thing, because flexitarianism is the real bridge for us. Flexitarianism is a big deal. In the UK alone, 13% of adults now identify as flexitarian, meaning they intentionally eat plant-based at least 2 days a week. That's the middle group, and that's how we grow. And that's a potential customer for this business. And it's also a way that we can move to a more sustainable planet and a more plant-based lifestyle without people missing this animal influence in their life. And believe me, we have to do it. Like, as humans, we have to move to this type of diet, because the earth can't sustain us continually eating all of these animals and living that lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's definitely all the things that I think about when, we're creating these tours, and that, evaluating partners and how they're operating in these places and looking at it as a whole and not, just one specific thing. I mean, obviously they all have to feed our clients. So like, if you can't, that is, one person asked me once, like, how do you choose hotels? Well, the first question is going to always be about food and like, hey, do you have vegan options? Let's see them. And then from there, we're going to drill down into other things and, trying to balance our areas and where we can make impact. And, things are never going to be perfect because, one, life isn't perfect, travel isn't perfect. And if anybody tells you otherwise, they are lying. So I guess, in the end of the day, our goal is always going to be making progress and impact and not focusing on the perfect part of it. But I know that doesn't always work for everybody.
I've got to bring up one thing here, just because I found this stat. No. I found this stat and I think it's crazy. Are you aware of the White Lotus effect?
Yes, I actually am aware of the White Lotus effect.
Okay, tell people what that is, because that is absolutely
you're
insane.
So excited about it, and I'm not sure how this wraps up this conversation, but go ahead.
I'm not trying to wrap up the conversation, but I just wanted to bring it up because it kind of goes back to peer pressure and influence and like the idea of like the perfect vacation or having perfection. And people see like what they see on television, like for instance, the White Lotus, and when they see peers or celebrities in pop culture settings, that can lead to massive spikes in booking, such as a 40% increase in interest for specific resorts featured in popular TV shows. Like, think about that. Like, people see Thailand, as a destination in the White Lotus recently. And then all of a sudden people are like, I got to go to Thailand. I've got to have that experience. And then they've got to have that exact same experience, like at that same hotel. It is absolutely insane. And I just had to bring it up. So,
oh my gosh, yes, that is true. So now after all of that, do you think then that vegans need to adjust their expectations when they're traveling, or that if they're militant about certain things, they should still carry on that militance?
I think it's okay to have high aspirations, and I think it's okay to have lofty goals. But I think what's really important is progress and impact. Even if millions of people make imperfect choices, the collective result is far greater than a handful of people doing things perfectly.
Absolutely. Do you think that makes them less vegan if they're not doing things perfectly? I guess actually I should ask you that personally, since you do consider yourself vegan. Do you think then that would make you less vegan, or that you would be, I don't know, living a lie?
Well, let me answer that with a question for you.
No. You have to answer my question.
Well, okay. Well, first let me say this. I don't think we can be perfect vegans all the time, because again, we live in a non-vegan world. And so we might have to make some choices that are out of necessity. And there are a group of people that just say, well, let's not travel. We shouldn't travel. So do you deny yourself experiencing the world in different cultures because you're trying to be a perfect vegan? I don't think that's the answer. I think you do the best that you can. And remember that if we're all working together to try to be better and we're trying to make progress, the more people that are trying to make progress, the more people we're going to have an impact with. Mm-hmm. So gradual behavior change is really what I hope we can accomplish. I don't see myself any less of a vegan because I'm not able to be perfect. I've had times where I've accidentally, I've ordered something and I didn't realize it wasn't vegan, and I'm in that predicament where it's like, well, what do I do with this? So I try to give it to a friend, or if it's food, I try to give it to a friend, or I try to return it. You do what you can. But then by that point, I've already driven it home. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I've already made an impact with my purchase. So it's really hard, and it's just the world that we live in. So I do the best that I can, and I think that's how things get better.
And I think that is a good place to leave it. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. If you did, please consider subscribing and leaving a review. If you'd also like to learn more about upcoming Veggies Abroad tours or get additional travel help, visit veggiesabroad.com and also join our newsletter. It's the best way to stay up to date with loads of new content, like where to find gorgeous vegan hotels, what to eat in cities around the world, trip planning tips, and so much more. Well, that's all I've got for now. Until next time.